Chad is sometimes called me the space curmudgeon, because you kind of have to demonstrate that this stuff makes sense to me, and that's another kind of theme that keeps coming out. And it's been an education for me personally, working with Chad and understanding the incentives and the whole structure of the New Start venture capital system, because it's different from what a classic business model is going to tell you. And I still think that at the end of the day, valuations have got to make sense, but Chad lives in a different world. And so just understanding that world for me personally has been incredibly valuable. The other thing that Chad brings is, he doesn't make this stuff up. He's great at pulling together the right data, putting it together in the right format. And I think he's brilliant. And what Space Angels does, I think, is really, really productive, because it has to make sense for Chad too. And so that's just tremendously valuable. And having someone involved in it that really does understand businesses and what makes sense is really important for the students, because it's not just hanging out a shingle and and making it work. And I think, one of the other things that I'm learning from Chad is that I won't say that the easy money has been made, but making money is going to be much harder in this business in the future than that was before 2 weeks ago, right? Because, we'd sort of had the first wave and a lot of money got spent and a lot of companies went out of business and things like that. And I think that investors are getting a lot smarter and a lot more careful about what they're putting money into. And so we need to train better people as investors. We need to train better people as managers. We need to train better people as entrepreneurs. And so, Chad has helped bring that home to me.
Okay, it's super important. And so for students or founders listening to this, watching this, understand that there is, and I've heard about this shift as well. Like it's almost .com era. Like, okay, we were throwing money at this thing. We didn't really understand it. But now there's this second wave of, well, a lot of this failed. And now we're a little more strict on understanding that model. But my key takeaway from hearing you, Andy, is that there is a model, or there are conditions about investing that we can learn from these angel investors. Yeah. It's not some weird esoteric thing. It is something that we can learn and then go and build into our business model.
Well, I think there's a lot we need to learn as an emerging industry. And part of it is, don't assume that the venture capital model is the only model out there and the only model that works, because it's not a good fit for most space ventures. If you're a data play and just taking data from existing space systems, repackaging, analyzing that data, however you do that, that looks an awful lot like a Silicon Valley IT firm. But if you're building spacecraft, if you're building launch vehicles, it's a tougher play. And I think actually the VC model ends up kind of distorting business plans, because what it forces you to do is you've got to come up with very high returns in a very short period of time. And in order to do that, you have to create a very aggressive business plan. And it creates a little bit of a vicious cycle, because a very aggressive business plan that's going to generate lots of profit requires lots of money up front.
Right.
And all of this hinges on capture of very large markets. And so you look at small launch, and 130 vehicles, each one is going to launch 50 times a year. And you got companies out there with billion-dollar valuations, $5 million launches, 50 launches a year, and $1 billion valuation. I actually did some back of the envelope discounted cash flows of what it would take to get there. And you have to end up with like 250 launches a year, 20% profit margins. And that's crazy. And at some point, a rational business model evaluation of this would say, all right, you know what, if you got 50 launches a year, you got reasonable 10% profits, maybe you're worth 250 million as at a reasonable valuation. So everything between 250 and a billion is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A fairy tale right now. So yeah, our listeners and viewers can go read Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman and find out all about what Andy just talked about there. Because he describes that whole thing about if you're galloping ahead. And I talk about that in our marketing as well, because we have companies do that. But Reid says, and he's a LinkedIn founder and a VC, move bits or bytes, not atoms. So you want information, not physical things, just like we talked about, to be able to do this. And you need to risk galloping ahead of your supply lines in order to go do this, and disaster. And that is not a good recipe for a physical based launch firm, right? So I've seen this myself and gone, gee, what do I do about it? Because I profess to help companies in that situation who are trying to move atoms do better. And yeah, there's a lot to it. And that's why we've got this long description of all the items that we help companies with. So,
well, and so I think that there are other business models that are out there. I mean, there are companies which have grown, at least for a period of time, organically, and mostly using government contracts. And so I think that, one of the ways to get around the problem of atom movers actually making money in a challenging environment is you need to do the hard things first, and maybe more slowly than you'd really like to, but you need to find government sources. Corporate funding is actually much more patient capital. You've got to look for patient capital. And then at some point, when you have the infrastructure and the market is there and you're ready to pounce on that market that exists, then you go get investment. And then you can go through exponential growth. But there aren't going to be that many SpaceXs. And remember, SpaceX started with the most patient capital of all, your own pocketbook.
More engineers are not going to solve your problem. It's not a technical problem in that sense. It's a process problem. And the time to fix your processes was 20 months ago. And the second best time is today. This is Jason Kanigan, the president of Cold Star Technologies and the host of this podcast, the Cold Star Project, which is all about identifying and solving process problems for space companies, because that's what we do. And you can hear the entirety of this episode by following the link in the comment below.